Hello, everyone. I am Sarah Michel, and this is another weekly challenge to God. My weekly or so streams where I challenge the so called Almighty to provide any evidence that He exists. So, doing this live stream, let's see if God is going to turn up and provide any empirical evidence that He, in fact, exists. But spoiler alert, he won't because he doesn't. And as always, during this stream, I'm going to give another reason why I keep saying that God doesn't exist. In this case, I'm going to say why I not only think that God doesn't exist, but that the existence of God doesn't really help us in understanding reality any better, as so many theists like to claim. Now, one of the reasons why theists say that we need is to understand why the world or why reality is the way it is. So, when we bring up scientific evidence to explain why reality works the way it does, theists often claim that we cannot, however, explain why reality has certain properties, or why the laws of nature, as we call them, are the way they are. And that's where they try to inject a God, as a God will provide an explanation for that. However, the idea of a God doesn't really explain anything, because even though we can measure matter and we can observe how things work, even in a subatomic level, we can simply give an explanation of how things work, but we cannot explain why. We cannot explain why is there something other than nothing? Why does gravity works the way it does? Why atoms behave? Why subatomic particles behave the way they do? And they simply say, well, because God wants them to be this way for whatever reason. And this for whatever reason is exactly why I say that God is a non-explanation. Because even though you say it's because of God or God wants it this way, it still doesn't explain why God doesn't wants it this way. You are simply shifting the explanation further. It doesn't explain anything. You have to believe that there is a God, and you have the belief that somehow you'll be able to ask this God the why things behave the way they do. Now, you, of course, having this belief on faith, and even if you meet a God, you will ask him why, he will give you whatever explanation, and that explanation will also lead to another why. And this is why I am not an agnostic, why I am an atheist rather than an agnostic. Because if I stop here, I would be an agnostic. Because I would say that either God or no God doesn't explain nothing. So I am completely neutral in this quest for understanding why things are the way they are. However, I go a bit further and I say that you can go on an infinite regression of whys and you will never have a satisfying answer. At some point, the answer will be simply because. So, for example, I get to meet God and I ask God, why is the universe the way it is? Why the universe has the properties that it does? And God will say, because I decide them to be this way. To which leads the question, why did you decide to make them this way? And God will give an answer to that. And I believe that that succession of whys is eternal. There will never be a satisfactory explanation to why. There will be some point where the answer will be simply because. And if that is the case, as I believe it is, And of course, I am open to someone who can give me a satisfactory explanation to that. I seriously doubt there is anyone who is capable of that. But as I am convinced that this regression is infinite until there is a point there is a because, God itself becomes completely redundant. You don't need a God. Because if the answer ultimately is because, then the answer to why does matter is the way it is, why does the universe has the properties it does, is because. And I believe this is an unanswerable question. There is no satisfactory answer to that. Meaning, we don't need a bleeding God. A God becomes absolutely redundant because it doesn't explain nothing. It's simply a belief that, as I have mentioned in my video about deism, is kind of a way to give maybe a false idea of closure, of our need for closure. It's a cognitive need that we have, but I don't think it really explains nothing. I think it's just an attempt to shift the explanation. So, a reason why I am not a theist, and as I said, as I believe the regression is infinite, a reason why I am not an agnostic. Because if it's infinite, if it's infinite, then of course there is no need for God. So anyway, I see Geek Room and Steve around. Thank you for dropping by. As always, end of this stream, end of this experiment, God didn't show up, didn't provide the evidence that I demand him to provide. And end of the report, end of the stream. Again, the conclusion is there is no God. I've been Sarah Michel. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.